welcome to a new episode of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo Malloy. The film that I will be discussing today is Evolution. Evolution is a 2001 sci-fi comedy that's directed by Ivan Reitman, the late, great Ivan Reitman, who's known for directing films such as the first two Ghostbusters movies and Kindergarten Cop. The film stars David Duchovny from The X-Files, Orlando Jones, Seann William Scott, and Julianne Moore. So, essentially the film focuses on two college professors played by Duchovny and Jones, a firefighting cadet played by Seann William Scott, and a government scientist played by Julianne Moore. They pretty much team up to work against the aliens that has been rapidly evolving since its arrival on Earth inside a meteor. The film was released in theaters on June 8th, 2001. It opened at number 4 with 13.4 million. So films that beat this at the box office include Swordfish, which is not a good movie, Shrek, classic, and Pearl Harbor, which I haven't seen. So during its theatrical run, it made 98.3 million. So essentially, that was about over 60 million international and over 38 million domestic. So this movie did not do well in its theatrical run because it has an $80 million budget. So in order for a film to break even, you need to make times 2. So with what it made during its theatrical run was not close. But it certainly became a cult classic for sure. In terms of reception, critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it 44%. So with the consensus, they say, director Reitman tries to remake Ghostbusters, but his efforts are largely unsuccessful because the movie has too many comedic misfires. Interesting. The audience gave it 47%. So it seems like the audience, they like it a bit more than critics, but essentially they agree that the film is not that good, which I'll discuss with my thoughts later. The film is available on VOD, so check your local provider. All right, let's go on to first discoveries. I first saw the film, it was many, many years ago. It was probably not long after it came out, I believe either on TV or maybe I rented. It was one of the two. For me, I appreciated like the sci-fi aspect of it, but in terms of the comedy, particularly the sex jokes, like I wasn't really fond of, because again I was young, so I didn't really understand like its references. But when I revisited this film for the podcast, I enjoyed it more because I really appreciated the concept, the performances from the cast, and the direction from Ivan Reitman. So yeah, so clearly like my thoughts changed from when I first saw it way back when. So it has, yeah, the rewatchability, I find. And I loved, yeah, like for the most part, what it was trying to achieve in terms of balancing the sci-fi and the comedy aspects. So there's some stuff I felt like didn't work, but I thought overall, like, it's a very enjoyable movie. So let's go on to highlights. So I like, yeah, the concept. For me, it felt like a mashup of Men in Black, a bit of Ghostbusters, and Jurassic Park with 2000s humor. Love the performances from the cast. For me, like, I would single out Seann William Scott as Wayne, because here he's not a complete buffoon, but his character had like a heart of gold, because essentially, even though like he fails, like particularly with his firefighter test, he really tries the best he could to help out the gang to defeat the aliens. So, and I was glad that he got his uh, firefighter license at the end. So good for Wayne. And also too, I loved Orlando Jones' performance as Harry because I found he, at least in my opinion, gave the best one-liners such as "There's always time for lubricant" or "Take the leg." Because yeah, I felt like he delivers for me every time when I see him on screen with the humor. I also like the X Files references. So if you like have not seen the show or the movies, essentially this again, it's been a while since I've seen it. So he David Duchovny, he plays an FBI agent who teams up with Gillian Anderson to solve cases that involve the unknown. Most of the time, it involves aliens. So there was quite a lot of references with the show, probably because of David Duchovny. Because I wondered though, like, if he hadn't signed on to the movie, if they would have kept those references, or would they have removed it? Because having him in the movie with those included is a cherry on top. So an example for this like would be when Harry and Ira they are heading to their office and they're discussing whether to tell the government on their discovery. So Ira, which is David Duchovny's character, he pretty much said absolutely not. I know those people, which is which is kind of is quite funny. So another aspect I liked is the look of the aliens. I thought that was interesting. Like there were some variations. Like for example, what there was the scene when like it looked like a crocodile like that attacked the asshole hotel guest by the golf course. And then you had like the one that Wayne finds inside the tank when he's at work. And then you have like the ones like in the mall sequence that look like dinosaurs essentially. So it seemed like the filmmakers, I guess, took inspiration probably like from those creatures to come up with the look for the aliens. So it was nice to see that the aliens here did not look like the typical aliens that you would see like in films such as Independence Day or the Alien movies and so forth. So good on them. So I would say my favorite look of the alien was with the cute the bulldog one that had like those sappy blue eyes that looked scared. Because with that scene when the ladies find the creature inside the cupboard, because it looked harmless because the other women they were afraid, but one of them decided to pet it and didn't know like how that was gonna go until the creature decided to launch the killer tongue. I'd say because that was totally unexpected. So I thought, yeah, that was hilarious. And I would say in quotes the jump scares like every time when the aliens attack the people. I find that always gets me every time I watch it because I know like they're coming because I've seen this movie many times, but every time when that happens, I always get surprised. But I kind of also like laugh too because it's hilarious as well. When the aliens like they eat each other, I found that was quite hilarious because it seemed like they do that for survival because clearly they can't live with the atmosphere. So I thought that was interesting. And I thought the scene with the dying aliens like on the field was quite scary. But then what really like surprised me was the one that came out of the dying one and then it was able to fly off. So I just wondered how come that one is able to survive, but then you see the other ones, they're pretty much dying. So that is something I would have loved to know. I thought the cameos, like we had John Cho as one of the students, but also I'd like to single out Sarah Silverman as Ira's ex-girlfriend. I thought her scene was quite hilarious. I thought it was quite unnecessary for her to undress when she's giving like his shirt back, which I wonder why is she wearing his shirt at the diner when she's with the police officer, but hey. And also too Dan Aykroyd as the governor. That was yeah, quite hilarious. I also loved the mall sequence because that one was quite fun and intense because clearly it was unexpected for the alien to attack the people inside the mall. I really felt for that shoplifter because yeah, like she couldn't run anywhere as she was like inside the changing room. But then luckily she gets saved by the boys, and when Wayne sings You Are So Beautiful, that was quite hilarious. So I thought that whole sequence was entertaining. I also and then also to that scene leads to the boys singing Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. So that was entertaining. The scene with the killer ape at the facility, that was quite intense because in a way like it kind of reminded me of Congo, which is a cheesy film from the 90s, which is based off a book. Essentially that one focuses on the white killer apes that attacks people. So I felt like the look of the ape in this movie, it reminded me of that film. But here though we see like it has three eyes, obviously because it's not a normal ape. And I would say too, I loved, yeah, like I said, Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. And also the song Anything the Main Thing Is by Patty Larkin, which is the theme of the movie because that one is played throughout the film. Because that one, I believe, so that one is played after the asteroid crashes at the beginning, and there were a couple instances throughout the film it was playing. And lastly, I would say a positive thing I liked Head and Shoulders. Because that was totally unexpected for Head and Shoulders to be like the MacGuffin to defeat the aliens. Because that was suggested by Danny and Deke, who are not the brightest students, but at least, you know, the knowledge that they had was put into good use to come up with the idea to use Head and Shoulders because it had the key ingredient. So it was kind of a good redemption for them because they are not the brightest because they get a C minus grade for their school paper while everyone else got an A. Because that scene was also quite hilarious. And also to product placements. So I assume Head and Shoulders at the time it probably got a boost because of this movie. Now on to the lowlights section. So for me, like what was noticeable was the CGI, particularly like when they showed like the close-ups of the aliens, and I would say too like with the opening sequence with the asteroid landing, because I felt yeah that they could have done a better job. I could forgive it a bit because this was the 2000s and it wasn't that sophisticated, so they could have used more practical effects I suppose, but again, yeah. um with the opening sequence, I felt for me, like as a preference, that it could have started with Wayne arriving at the desert to do his practice test instead of showing the meteor crashing. Because for me, though, like when you show a scene of a disaster approaching, it kind of puts you in the mood of those disaster films, like a lot of the Roland Emmerich films. So but because this is like a comedy, like I felt like the threat wasn't, too threatening. So again, that was just a preference for me, but it is what it is. The sex jokes for me did not land, and they particularly haven't aged well, because a lot of them, for the most part, were directed towards Julianne Moore's character. Because the boys pretty much, particularly Ira and Harry, they poke fun at her because she's very like strict and she's also clumsy, and they're like, oh, she needs sex to loosen up, which is ridiculous. But then towards the end, her character sleeps with Ira, so I felt, yeah, like they could have removed that aspect of the movie because that kind of took it away from me. The blue goo that Ira finds looks like the Downy dish soap. I don't know if they actually used dish soap to make it look like it was the Discovery, but yeah. And I had like a few like unanswered questions. So for one, why does Harry and Ira take the class to the meteor site? Because there are some clearly safety risks, and I just wondered, did the school approve this? Because since it's a new discovery, like you don't know what to expect because they clearly say like, oh, like these creatures are evolving very rapidly, and with that in mind, you just don't know what to expect. So yeah, like it wasn't a good job for them to take them to the meteor site. Like I get, you know, the students would get a learning experience for the class, but at the same time, yeah, a lot of safety, violations there. Also, to an unanswered question, how did the government get involved when Ira and Harry didn't say anything? Because there was a scene where, with Ty Burrell's character, he mentioned that, oh, we've been looking at your computer. But I just wonder, though, like, have they been looking at his computer since Ira left? So, just for backstory, Ira used to be a colonel for the military. That's why there is that friction with Ira and the person running the military. So, yeah, like if I felt like, that could have been explained. Because for me, it just felt like they just showed up out of nowhere to control the situation. Also, too, with the asshole hotel guest whose name is Barry, why does he set up a date in the middle of the night at a golf course when there's a party happening? Because that did not make sense. Like, I get, yeah, that with his death scene, he deserved it. But at the same time, I just wondered, like, why set it up there? Maybe just to set up that, yeah, we're gonna kill you now. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. But so let's go on to trivia. So this movie has a lot of fun facts, which I don't have the time to look over. So you guys could check out like the facts on IMDb or do your own research online. So I'll just highlight a select few. So after when the film was released, there was an animated series called Alienators Evolution Continues, but it was also known as Evolution the Animated Series in some regions, including the United Kingdom. So that came out in September 15th, 2001 on Fox Kids. Which kind of brings me back to memories, watching Fox Kids as a kid, because I remember I used to watch Power Rangers, Digimon, all that sorts of stuff. It was too bad that Fox Kids no longer exist, but it happens. So the film was initially written as a serious sci-fi action thriller. So Ivan Reitman hired David Diamond and David Weisman to rewrite it as a Ghostbusters style comedy. The original writer, Don Jacoby, actually enjoyed the changes so much he continued working on the film alongside the other writers. So I thought that was interesting. Because usually, though, when they hire like other writers to revamp the script, usually like the original writer is fired. An example would be with the first Die Hard movie, because that one, yeah, that's covered in the episode of I believe it's called The Films or the Movies That Made Me, that's on Netflix, which covers the behind the scenes for that movie. So essentially what happened is that the original writer for Die Hard kind of wrote the script as a serious action movie, but then once I guess they found a director and all that stuff, another writer was hired essentially to make it a bit more lighter than it was in the first draft. So that's pretty much, example of these sort of situations, but I'm just glad here that he was able to, be a part of the project. So good on him. So during the lengthy shoot in Arizona, Dan Aykroyd, he entertained the locals by carding guests at a bar, unofficially greeting people at Walmart, and visiting locals for a cup of coffee in their homes. That's very generous of him. So, if any of you have any fond memories of Dan Aykroyd visiting, says here, Page, Arizona, reach out on social media. Love to hear your stories on that. Now, with David Duchovny, so apparently he turned down a role in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, to appear in this movie. That was obviously a good choice because Episode 2 was not good. So you made the wise choice. Now, the last few facts are going to deal with Head and Shoulders. So for first, the placement of the element selenium in the Head and Shoulders shampoo is technically correct, though regular Head and Shoulders shampoo does not have any of the element. Their intensive treatment shampoo actually does consist of approximately 1% selenium sulfide. Interesting. So at the time the film was made, no Head and Shoulders product contained selenium sulfide, but the company used the film to introduce their selenium product, which was released when the film came out. Interesting, because I would imagine that, when Head and Shoulders is used in an effective way in the film, they would absolutely use it to their benefit to boost sales. And lastly, so at the end of the film, Ira, Harry, and Wayne, they perform a commercial for Head and Shoulders. And the idea for that came from Jason Reitman, who's the son of Ivan Reitman. So good on him. Because I thought, that was like a fun way to tie in the product while also showing them defeat the aliens. So I thought that was clever. Now, lastly, I usually end with this question. Should this movie be rediscovered? I would say yes. I would say because this movie does a good job with the sci-fi and the comedy. It has a nice blend to it, even though, like I said, the sex jokes for me did not work. And also, too, it has those jump scares, which, at least for me, it makes me kind of scared every time an alien attacks someone. And speaking of the aliens, They were fun to watch and also intense. And I will say the performances from the cast just seemed like, they all had good chemistry and that they're all having a good time filming this movie. So that pretty much wraps up this episode of the podcast. So you can follow myself on Twitter and Instagram at Nomfanelo. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at RDMoviesPod, and you can use the hashtag RDMoviesPod. You can answer the featured question on Spotify. Like, share, and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform. Also to leave a review, because it might be shared in a future episode. Also, too, you could submit questions, comments, and suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com, or also leave a short voice message on anchor.fm/rdmoviespod. So thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, and I'll leave you guys here with this note. Head and shoulders around the house. Until next time.